Next, we'll talk about removing items from a list, slicing a list, and finding the length of a list. Now let's just start with removing items. Let's say I have a list, simple list like this. And there are two methods to remove items from a list. The first one is simply just method remove, dot remove, and you select the item you want to remove. Let's say in this case I want to remove item 3, number 3 from this list. So if I do print my list after the change, still shift enter, then you can see I have the list and I removed number 3. Right, number 3 is removed. So with this you can select a specific item to remove from the list, and remember that once you apply this method to your list is now updated and the old list doesn't exist. Right, the old list had 4 items and now the list that you applied the method remove to has 3 items. So it doesn't return anything, it changes the list in place, as we call it. Now another method that you might use is method.pop, which basically helps you to remove the last item in the list. Now aside from that, it also returns that specific item, like last item. Right? So previous method didn't return anything when you apply method remove to your list. Here, this one removes the last item and returns that item. So let's say you want to keep that item that you're removing for a specific purpose. So this would be print my list. So first we'll see what does the list look like after not that last item. After we remove the last item, and then we'll check to make sure we're keeping that item. All right, so the list is 1 2 3 4 5. We remove the last item, we get 1 2 3 4, and then the last item is also stored in last item, so this returns that item. Another thing you do with lists, typically a common operation, is to slice a list. Now that's kind of important because most of the time when you define a list, you actually don't want the whole list, or when you import data, you don't want the whole data for any operation or all the operations. Depending on what you do, you might just want to manipulate a certain portion of the list. So to slice a list, I'm just going to call this my list. We simply just use colon, and we define the beginning and ending the beginning index and ending index. In this case, I can leave the beginning empty, which means I start from the beginning of the list, and let's say I want the first 3 items. If I do that, I can just put print. Alright, so I'll get the highlight, shift enter, so I get the first 3 items 0 1 2. Now if I want the first 4 items, of course the same, I just put 4. Slices 0 1 2 3 from this list. Now I left the beginning empty, but I could define something. Let's say instead of starting from the beginning, I want to start from 1. Right? So if I run that, now I'm not really slicing from 0. I say, well, I want the first, well, the end is the 4th item here, but then I'm not starting from 0, I'm starting from 1. So that would be 1 2 3. Right? Another thing that you can do when you're slicing is slicing. Same story, you can define the beginning and ending, but you can also define the step. Let's say you have a long list. Right? I'm going to change this list maybe to a longer list, something like this. And let's say you want to start from the beginning. You want to go up to item 7, right? So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, these items. But you don't want every single item in this slice. You want to get every other item. All right, let's say you want every other item in this slice. So if I run this, shift enter, now you see I started, I said, well, I want the first 7 items, but I don't want all of them. I want, if these are the first 7 items, I want every other item. So 0, 2, 4, and 6. And that's it. So you can actually use steps, as we call every other item, using steps for slicing. The last thing regarding slicing that can come handy is there is something called negative index or negative indexing in Python, and you can actually use that slicing using negative index to slice your list, counting not from the beginning of the list but from the end of the list. Let's say I have my list, right? And here is what I do. I say let's say I want the last 3 items of the list. So I use -3, meaning that I start the counting from the end of the list. So -1, -2, -3. I want the last 3 items. Right? If I print that, and shift enter, you will see I'm getting 7, 8, 9. Okay. I did not have to start from the end of the list, right? So this is, let's say, this one tells me where is the beginning of the slice, and this is -3, means -1, -2, -3. This is the beginning of the slice. How far do you want to go? I left it empty, means I want to go all the way to the end of the list. But if I, let's say, start from -4 and I say I want to go to -1, right? So I start from -1, 2, 3, 4 here, and I say I want to go all the way up to here, not to the end of the list. So if I print that, now I get 6, 7, 8. So you can play around with this depending on if you want to start your slicing, the counting for the index for slicing from the beginning or end of the list. Where do you want to start? The general format is starting point, ending point, and the steps, right? You can still add a step even to the negative slicing. You can just play around with that. And the last thing is finding the length of a list, and that's pretty straightforward. We have the function called length, so I can simply just put length and then my list, right? And then that gives me the length of the list, means this list includes 10 items. One thing I want to bring to your attention is if you have a list of lists or a nested list like this, and if you apply length to this, this only gives you the length of the main list. So in this case, I have 3 items here, 1, 2, and 3. Right? This just could be a simple number. If I run that, right, this gives me 3, meaning that there are 3 items in this list. You don't really get the length of the nested lists in a list. That it requires a little bit of manipulation and using a for loop that we will maybe revisit when we discuss for loops in Python.